Live from Toronto, Canada, The Conspiracy Show with Richard Serrin from Zoomer Radio, AM 740.
And welcome to the Audio Imaginarium. Come on in, weary traveler, hang your cloak on a peg, grab a stool, and come gather round the fire. There are stories to be told, and you are among friends. Suspense author, historical researcher Steve Ubaney is standing by, and he'll be here for the full 2 hours to discuss his latest in his Who Murdered series of books. Previously, Stephen has published Who Murdered Elvis and Who Murdered FDR, and now he's tackling the death of Princess Diana, who died in a car crash in Paris in August of 1997, along with her boyfriend, Dodi Fayed, and their driver, Henri Paul. We'll get to that conversation in just a moment. Just a reminder, if you haven't already done so, please register at strangeplanet.ca, strangeplanet.ca, and then you'll start receiving my monthly newsletter, The Inner Sanctum, and it'll be delivered to your email inbox every month. It features previous guest spotlights, a book club, my podcast pick of the month, my monthly brief, and more. This day in conspiracy history. The Inner Sanctum, yours free by registering at strangeplanet.ca. And once you register, you'll also qualify for the monthly draw for free Strange Planet merchandise. Carlos Cagina is my technical producer, filling in for Owen Wolf. Ryan White is my live stream producer, and we are live streaming tonight on my YouTube channel. Get on up to Strange Planet at the YouTube, and make sure you hit that red sub button. A new book is claiming that the accident that led to Princess Diana's death may have been planned. There was apparently a plan to kill the Princess of Wales. She was gravely injured, of course, in a deliberate car wreck, my guest says, in the tunnel underneath the Alma Bridge in Paris, France, and allowed to slowly bleed to death. There have also been conspiracy theories suggesting that Henri Paul, Princess Diana's driver, was involved with MI6 and that the British Secret Intelligence Service caused the accident. However, French investigators say they found no evidence involving the British state or the royal family in the accident. Princess Diana's former royal butler, Paul Burrell, previously said he suspected Prince Charles, or rather that Princess Diana suspected Prince Charles of plotting an automobile accident to kill her and eventually marry Camilla Parker Bowles even before her car crash. Steve Ubaney is an American suspense author who reinvestigates the deaths of famous people using his newly discovered facts that debunk historical claims. His books deduce that some of history's most famous deaths were actually murders. Previously, Steve published Who Murdered Elvis and Who Murdered FDR, and his latest is Who Murdered Diana? A Crash by Design. Steve Ubaney, welcome back to The Conspiracy Show. How are you, my friend?
Richard Serrin, it's nice to talk to you again.
Delight to have you back. So this topic has been covered by two official investigations. There was the Lord Stevens investigation. Previous to that, there was another one. Where did you dive in here in terms of your investigation? How did you approach this topic that it's been covered pretty extensively, but what did you bring new to the dance? Let's put it that way.
Well, the people who have interviewed or investigated this beforehand got to the point where they said, oh, well, we found evidence that the royal family did it or was involved, and they stop. That's where my evidence, that's where my investigation starts. So I pick up where everyone else seems to have stopped. What got me involved in this, I knew immediately. You had these moments indelified in your mind where, people know who were alive when JFK was shot, where they were. And Elvis Presley, of course, I was on the planet for that one. You know where you were and what you were doing. When Princess Diana, when I got word that this happened, I was in the pool with my girlfriend in Las Vegas. My neighbor came out, and I knew immediately something had happened that was very suspicious, because about 2 months beforehand, she was on a landmine campaign. And she was starting to get involved in international politics. So those two things didn't wash for me. So I knew immediately something was wrong. It's been covered extensively, but it's been covered by confirmation bias, kind of paralleling the Warren Commission report. if you only look at the evidence that brings you to the conclusion that you want to have a conclusion to, you're going to come to that conclusion. But when you look at the whole body of evidence, you can come to different conclusions. So it has been covered, and they did the Paget report, which was the conclusion of everything that they had done. They opened it twice under commission of the Royal Court. The Royal Court, operative word royal, under commission of the Queen. Okay. So I was on a show, last year, and it was right after we did, I think, our last show. We're old buddies. We've been on the air a bunch of times, for those of us who don't know that. I think this is my 9th interview with you, or something crazy like that. Anyway, we did it was right after the last. Yep. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
It was right after the last time we were on together. And I don't always end up the first guy on the show. Usually, sometimes there are people in front of me and I have to wait, And sometimes it's crazy because they're crazy people talking to this Loch Ness monster on a two-way radio, and then I have to wait, And sometimes it's really fascinating. Well, the guy who was in front of me on a show, the guy's name was Jack Firestone. And him and his wife, Robin, and their son witnessed the crash.
They were in the Elma Tunnel. They were in the Elma Tunnel that night.
They were Americans. Right. They were Americans on vacation in France in Elma Tunnel, witnessed the crash. Go to the French police. Give a full report to the French police. That report was never turned over to the British government. So we started to dig a little bit. There were 11 or 12 such instances where eyewitnesses to the crash had given their testimony to the French police, and it was discarded. So, I
they
hate
were never never asked to testify. In other words, at the Stevens inquiry or the one previous.
No, when they called up all the witnesses, quote unquote witnesses, these people were never called to the first one. And, they were kind of wondering, they called each other, did you get called? No. Did you get called? No. So if they're investigating the full body of evidence, these people should have been called.
And what did they see? You spoke to them. What did they see?
In reference to what, Roger?
The crash.
Well, I don't want to get into. They've got their own books out, so I really don't want it to tread on their turf. But definitely something different than what was being reported. This white Fiat Uno that everyone is talking about, that is supposedly the culprit, and there's a new book out now called Princess Diana Case Solved or something by Dylan Howard, who's a good researcher.
I know.
They found the driver to the white Fiat Uno who collided with the car, and this and that and the other thing. What they're all reporting is that the paparazzi had nothing to do with it. They were 5 minutes behind because the Princess Diana boyfriend, bodyguard, and driver, Henri Paul, exited from the back of the hotel, not the front. So the people who were in front are still waiting for them to come out. They exited to the back because they were trying to escape the pictures and the faldera,
Right.
So they're already in the tunnel before the paparazzi. People, do they even use that word anymore, paparazzi? The people who take pictures of famous people, I guess.
Right.
So, they were way behind because they had to figure out, well, they're not coming out. There they are. So they were way behind. And of course, the stories leaked that the paparazzi caused this and that and the other thing. And the witnesses in the tunnel claimed that there were motorcycles, one in front, one on the side, or two on the side, if I'm not mistaken. I think it was two, and one in back. And they're the ones that basically, at a high speed, crashed the limousine. And this Fiat Uno was less involved than everyone is making out.
Well, there was the white Fiat Uno, according to, I'm not sure if it was the Stevens inquiry or the one previous, and it came up then that the French police had interviewed this Vietnamese security guard who was supposedly the driver of the white Fiat Uno, And they said that according to forensic tests, the paint and the rubber on his car, again, this is the Vietnamese security guard who was driving a white Uno, it supposedly matched the traces found on the Mercedes. But then we had another version of that, and that was, I believe it was, Richard, I'm not sure if Richard Tomlinson, who was a former British spy, revealed this or someone else, but that according to the other version, the driver of the white Fiat Uno was somebody named Addison, who ended up, they found him in a burnt out, the remains of the Fiat Uno in the woods somewhere in France, I think, with a bullet in the back of his head.
Yeah, he was shot twice in the back of the head and his body was burned.
Right,
you know, happens to everybody, Richard. You know,
sure.
You know, I mean, this is just everyday thing here. You know,
so who was the driver? Who, according to your research, then was it the Vietnamese security guard in that white Fiat Uno in the tunnel, or was it Addison?
I find it hard to believe that it matters. They're not the ones that caused the accident or killed anybody. I mean, They might have hit the car on the way out, but you know, this is why my research is a little bit different. I don't care if Bigfoot was driving a white Fiat Uno. I really don't care. It's not, there's a bigger story here, and this is what I'm focusing on. Why the French and the British government are cooperating together is beyond me. I mean, these people have had a storied past. They had 100 years war between these two. I just can't imagine why one is covering from the other. And this is where my book is going to focus on, because there's an invisible thread behind all of these governments. There are people, there are kings and there are kingmakers, okay? And of course, the kings are presidents and leaders of country. The kingmakers are the ones that really put them in power. And there are people who are at high levels who wanted Princess Diana silenced. Princess Diana had a very interesting past with car accidents. When she severed from her husband, from Prince Charles, in probably the craziest divorce that ever was. I mean, she was on British television telling everyone he's not fit to be king, and she said all kinds of terrible things about him, and vice versa. The first boyfriend that she had, and I won't mention his name, they got caught screwing around by another security officer that she had. It was reported. This guy was immediately transferred to another assignment and died in a car accident. 1995, Princess Diana is driving an Audi. Brake failure. She almost died in a car accident in 1995. So, you know, it's interesting how these car accidents and these problems keep surrounding this person and all of the people around, not all of them, but a good percentage of the people around her. What's interesting, what I find really interesting is, well, the whole thing is kind of interesting, but Paul Burrell, the butler to Princess Diana,
yes,
who was, really, he was really there for her through thick and thin. And he wrote him a letter. My husband is I'm going to die in a car accident, blah, 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 gives him this letter. This letter never makes it to the inquest. Unless I'm mistaken, they never saw this. This went to Scotland Yard, where it was filed away in a safe, and then it came out.
I think there was a couple of letters. Yeah, I think she wrote one to Burrell, and then she wrote another one to her, another one, and her barrister, her attorney, sent that to Scotland Yard, where I think it remained sealed during the Paget inquiry or the Lord Stevens inquiry. You're right.
Well, right, absolutely. Let's not include it. And you're right. You're absolutely right. Her barrister was involved. You have to forgive me. I've been up for 2 days straight. I'm on a writing binge, and authors are often insomniacs. So, God knows what's going to fly out of my mouth here. But thanks for correcting me on that one. That's, that was big. There were multiple letters, and they did go to Scotland Yard, and they were not part of the report. So
now
I don't know how they weren't part of the report. But this is confirmation bias at its finest. They're only looking for things that support what they want the outcome to be.
Now, you mentioned the motorcycle and the bright light. And again, I mentioned Richard Tomlinson earlier. He was the former, I believe he was MI6. And he talked about how the murder of, or the bright light on the back of the motorcycle, like a strobe distracting the driver, how that was used in an assassination attempt against the Serbian president, Milosevic, and he said that it was eerily similar. The details of how Princess Diana may have been taken out.
Absolutely. I mean, is Richard Tomlinson still with us?
I believe so.
Because I've tried to contact him on a couple of occasions, and I didn't know if he was still with us or not. He's got to be up in age now, isn't he?
I'm not sure, but if he is alive, I'm sure he's keeping a pretty low profile. But this was I believe he said it was an MI6 plot to kill Milosevic. And again, it included a bright flash in a tunnel. What else sort of doesn't add up for you during that trip to the tunnel, through the tunnel?
Oh, boy. How much time do you have? They get there, and they being the EMTs, they're called, they get there, and it's like the Keystone Cops get there. There's already a doctor on the scene. A passerby was a doctor who was administering to the people in the crash. Dodi Fayed and the driver Henri Paul were killed immediately. And the person in the passenger side front was the bodyguard, and his name's escaping me.
Oh, Trevor Rees-Jones. Trevor Rees-Jones.
There you go. See, you're sharper than I am tonight. Look at that. He had his face ripped off, and he had multiple surgeries to, remain, human looking. I mean, this guy really, really got tore up bad. So he's administering to, the passenger who's her surviving, and Princess Diana. And Princess Diana was talking, apparently. She was talking, she was moaning, but she was conscious. So the emergency medical squad show up. The doctor says, okay, you've got it. See you later. They take over. He leaves. And they fiddle around until, it was an hour and change before they got Princess Diana to a hospital. This is insane. This is insanity. They passed two hospitals, closer hospitals, getting her to a hospital. It just defies all logic.
Right. They claim they have this different protocol in France, where I think they call it stay and play, where they try and stabilize the patient before they get to the hospital, whereas I don't know what we call it in North America. I think it's called scoop and run or something. You take that person, you get them in the back of an ambulance, and you race to emergency as fast as you possibly can.
Well, I'll tell you what. The speed of the ambulance has nothing to do with what's going on in the back. The ambulance driver has one job: to get the patient there as fast as they can. And what's going on in the back, that can go at any speed. That's what they're trained to do. And the fact that they're stopping along the way and making excuses for them stopping, taking an hour or so to get her, it boggles the mind how she was the least injured and ends up dying in this. So all of that combined with suspicious flashing lights. The cameras were not working that night, which was convenient.
Yeah, isn't that always the case? We're just coming up on a break here, but you mentioned the cameras. So I'm not sure how many cameras were supposed to be inside Alma Tunnel, but none of them are working. Does that sound familiar? None of the cameras that are pointed at Jeffrey Epstein in his holding cell are working. The cameras surrounding the Pentagon, the most defended building in the world, a lot of them weren't working. It's kind of a common theme, isn't it?
It really is. And when we come back from the break, because I know we're up against a hard break, when we come back, I'm going to talk about how all of these things tend to be the same. The cover-up in this is very similar to the cover-up in the Kennedy assassination. So I guess we'll talk about that when you get back.
we got about a minute here. You've piqued my interest. How similar? Give me, for instance, how it's similar to the JFK. Just one, and then we'll talk more on the other side.
The hastily sanitized death scene. John Kennedy is in Parkland with his head blown off. The Secret Service is out there. We have a crime scene on our hands. They're washing the blood splatter out of the limousine.
Right.
Case of Princess Diana, she barely is at the hospital. They're already washing down the evidence and reopening the tunnel.
Really? How I wasn't aware how quickly they opened the tunnel.
Oh, yeah. I mean, don't look for evidence you don't want to find.
Right.
I mean, the whole thing is just, and again, the confirmation bias. You know, there were 2 guns found in the JFK assassination. The first gun found was a Mauser. The second gun found was a Mannlicher Carcano. Okay, evidence. We can't talk about the second gun. We have a second gun. We have a second shooter. They have pictures of it, but we can't talk about it. So let's just exclude that so we can come down to one conclusion. Same thing with Princess Diana. There was evidence, again, given to the French police, that was missing. So all of these things have, in Elvis Presley's death, all his stomach contents were rinsed down the sink at the hospital.
How convenient. All right, we will take that time out now, Steve. Stay with us. On the other side, more of my conversation with suspense author, historical researcher Steve Ubaney, and his new one, available for pre-order, is Who Murdered Diana? A Crash by Design. Back with more of The Conspiracy Show. Stay with us.
New you, new smile. Ultima Dental is having a huge sale on teeth whitening. All through the month of February, Philips Zoom Professional In-Chair Teeth Whitening is only $295. Zoom Take-Home Whitening Kits, $195. This price will not be beat. Arrange an appointment at ultima.ca. That's ALTIMA.ca. Offer ends February 29th. Book your teeth whitening with Ultima Dental for a brighter, whiter smile.
If you're looking for hot stuff, you've come to the right place. Summer, the Donna Summer musical. The new sparkling must-see musical of the moment, where every night the audience reaches a fever pitch. Summer, the Donna Summer musical. At the Princess of Wales Theatre, March 10th through 22nd. Get tickets at mervish.com.
Should a recession strike the world economy, will you be a slave to it? Or will you know the right trading strategies to take advantage? Saturday and Sunday on Zoomer Radio, join the Online Trading Academy. Get access to the same markets as the pros. Learn how they do it and how you can profit from direct online trading. Listen to the Online Trading Academy, weekend mornings at 7:30 on Zoomer Radio. Register now for a free introductory trading and investing class. Visit torontoclass.com or call 888-670-TRADE.
Living with chronic pain changes everything because it changes how you see those things you do every day. Tying your shoes?
Pain.
Climbing those stairs?
Pain.
Vacuuming the house?
So much pain.
Walking around on vacation?
All pain, all the time.
If pain is affecting everything in your life, even the things you like to do, there are options. Book a free health assessment at an Apollo clinic today or visit apolloclinic.ca.
Welcome back to The Conspiracy Show. Richard Serrett with you, along with Steve Ubaney, and he is the author. Well, this is I believe, the third in his Who Murdered series, Who Murdered Elvis, Who Murdered FDR, and the brand new one available for pre-order, and we'll tell you how to get that in a moment, is Who Murdered Diana? A Crash by Design. Just before we were talking about a little bit about Richard Tomlinson, the former MI6, and he is apparently still very much alive. In fact, he's only a year older than I am, so he is getting up there. But he's still with us, and his whereabouts unknown as far as I know. Okay, so we were talking about the similarities between the JFK assassination and Princess Diana's death. You talked about sanitizing the crime scene, how they quickly reopened the Alma Tunnel. You talked about evidence that was withheld from the French police.
Absolutely. I want to step in here for a second. This is actually book number 4 because I did 2 on Elvis.
Oh, that's right. The anniversary book.
Right.
That's right.
One started the research, the other one concluded the research. As far as there are common threads that go through all of these, and I hate to call myself a conspiracy guy because I don't even like conspiracies. I'm a history detective, and I dig into things that have been revealed and released and uncovered long after these people have died, and I just try and solve these murders with new evidence that has been uncovered. In the case of FDR, I found a diary that his cousin published. Her name was Daisy Suckley, and the name of the diary is closest companion. In the diary, she's talking to FDR's doctor, and FDR's doctor is saying he's being poisoned, and they have no idea what the cause is. So we didn't know that back then. But as far as So I hate conspiracies. I do stumble upon them. I'm not a conspiracy writer, but I know them when I see them. And this one's kind of good. Loose definition conspiracy. Not all conspiracies are frivolous and crazy and, foil hat people. Loose definition of conspiracy is two people acting in concert to perform an act. So it's overly broad. The two words that never should be said together are conspiracy theorist, ever, because not all conspiracies are theorists. There are people in court for conspiracy right now. It's a real thing.
That's right. So, criminal conspiracy, right.
I always like to clear that up because, I don't want to be labeled a conspiracy guy. I don't care if the earth is flat. I'm on it. I'm good with that. So I dig into history.
Right. But here's the thing. Here's the thing, Stephen. A good homicide detective is a conspiracy theorist. Because he's trying to figure out, okay, who murdered this person, who benefits, was there more than one person involved? And if there was an accessory to the crime, then you have a conspiracy. So a homicide detective, I always argue, should be a conspiracy theorist, and an investigative journalist really has to be a conspiracy theorist. I don't have a problem with the word.
You follow the evidence. You follow the evidence, and the evidence take you where it needs to be, and you get your group of suspects. And in all of my books, I run the suspects through motive, means, and opportunity. And in the end, based on the screening process, we come up with the person. So anyway, getting back to your question, as far as
the connection, the commonalities between JFK and Princess Di.
There are commonalities all over the place between, I don't really want to go into them and dominate the whole show. That'll all be covered in my book. And get a piece of paper and a pen in a second. I'm going to tell you how you can get the book. But to answer your question, Elvis Presley's death scene. Okay, they take the body, they take it to Baptist Memorial Hospital. Again, not the closest hospital. Isn't that interesting? Okay, Baptist Memorial was not the closest hospital to Elvis Presley. So they broke protocol to take him, or the corpse of him, to Baptist Memorial, just like Diana, not the closest hospital. Okay, so they come back, they being EMTs. When they left his bedroom, there was evidence of a struggle. There was papers all over the place. The place was a disaster. It was a mess. They come back, we're possibly 45 minutes to an hour later. The place is spotless. The carpet's been shampooed. Everything has been sanitized and moved, and it's pristine looking. They've just destroyed you can't do any sort of an investigation when this happens. Same thing with Kennedy. Here we are cleaning the blood splatter out of the limousine of a president that was just shot in the head. You can't do any sort of a good criminal analysis on that at that point. Same thing with Princess Diana. Here she is. She's barely at the hospital. They're washing the tunnel down with a hose, and they're reopening the tunnel. It just defies logic. And it defies logic for a reason. It's meant to be a cover-up. And, in Elvis Presley's case, there were 3 toxicology reports done. The first 2 showed no codeine. The last one showed codeine at 11 times the lethal level. But Elvis Presley was allergic to codeine. And when I talked to Dan Warlick, who dissected his vocal cords, there was no swelling in his body. So we have codeine in one of the 3 toxicology reports, but not in his body? You can't make this stuff up.
Doesn't add up.
Same thing. Same thing with Princess Diana. The same thing with her. I mean, all of these things are in play. They all have the same thing. Marilyn Monroe, staged death scene. Sonny Liston, staged death scene. You know, there's a common thread between all of these people and who they've been involved with, and I'll cover that in my book. But you know, if Princess Diana, she gets to, by the time they get her to the hospital, she's either been murdered in the ambulance or treatment has been delayed to the point where there's no helping this poor lady.
Right, they let her bleed out.
There's absolutely no reason. It's inexcusable that she would die in a car accident like that. She was in the back seat on the opposite side of the impact. It makes no sense.
And I've heard that something that was very peculiar in that the bodyguard, Trevor Rees-Jones, again, he's in the passenger seat. Henri Paul is driving. The security guard, Trevor Rees-Jones, or the bodyguard, he buckles up, and that's against protocol, which is kind of interesting. As if, you know, he was, expecting a crash. I don't know. What do you think of that?
I think it's very strange. There's a lot of strange things going on. The seat buckles in the car didn't work in the back seat.
Did they switch out the car? Did they switch out the car last minute? Was it a different car?
To my knowledge, no. You know, and then they have the Henri Paul, the driver, who is an MI6 operative, or so they claim, who has bank accounts all over the place worth all kinds of money. And then in his toxicology report comes up that he's intoxicated and he's on drugs, and one of the drugs were for worms, which his doctor even confessed he doesn't know where that came from. So, I mean, all of this, again, planted evidence to twist things around. It's all the same. It's just a repeat. Once you start digging into these things, as far as I dig into things, and boy, do I dig into things, you start to notice these commonalities involved in one thing to the next to the next. Okay, so I told people to get a piece of paper and a pen, so I'm going to tell them where they can get the book.
All right.
Go to my website. I'm taking pre-orders for this book, and the book is Who Murdered Diana, and the website is whomurderedbooks.com, and we just did a brand new website. We just did it for you. So I hope you like it. Go browse around, pre-order a book. And I think you'll be very, very impressed. All pre-order books get autographed and numbered, so not all do, but the pre-orders do. And I'm giving it at a reduced price right now. It's published in May. It'll be orders that are taken after May will be a little more expensive. So get yourself a book. I think you'll be very impressed with this.
WhoMurderedBooks.com. WhoMurderedBooks.com. You mentioned Henri Paul.
All lowercase. That's all lowercase, one word, whomurderedbooks.com.
You mentioned Henri Paul and the original toxicology report, and there were several, I think, that were performed, and one said, 3 times over the alcohol limit, although people who looked at the security footage inside the Ritz Paris said that he certainly didn't appear drunk. They also found, this was interesting, they found carbon monoxide levels in his blood, and they were so high that he shouldn't have been able to stand, let alone operate a vehicle. So what do you think? Did they switch the blood? There was a theory that maybe the blood sample was switched. It came from a homeless person who was sleeping over a subway grate or a ventilation system, and hence the carbon monoxide poisoning.
Well, it's a great theory. I don't know. Well, I hate to involve myself in theories like that because there's no way to really prove it. It's a great theory. I'm sure that it was probably, if this is just like all of the other ones, all of the other deaths that I've met, the commonalities involved in most of these deaths, I'm sure they did alter it. Elvis Presley had 3 toxicology reports done. Everyone was different. This guy, he had different toxicology reports done. If they did this, switched it with a homeless person to afford blame on this person, it wouldn't surprise me at all. Wouldn't surprise me a bit. They're good at this. In the case of
Sorry, go ahead.
In the case of Sonny Liston, he was found. He was terrified of needles. He had a real phobia. Even his dentist said you couldn't give him a needle. He was found with needle marks in his arm, with with dope all around him. There was nothing in his system. Sanitized death scene. It was staged that way. Same thing like Presley's death was staged. Same thing like Princess Diana. And what they do is they plant evidence, they plant documents to twist and contort the story, to sell the story and the narrative that, well, people like quick and easy things. Well, Elvis died of a drug overdose. Oh, this person, crashed because he was drunk.
All right, we'll take
I'm
another
surprised. I'm
Sorry,
surprised.
Stephen. I've got to jump in here. We'll take a quick time out and come back. Steve Ubaney, Who Murdered Diana? A Crash by Design. WhoMurderedBooks.com to pre-order. Back with more in a moment. Stay with us.
The truth is not out there. It's right here. The Conspiracy Show with Richard Sarrett from Zoomer Radio.
Jazz is seen by many as America's classical music. And one orchestra is on a mission to strengthen the legacy of jazz for future generations. The Rose Brampton presents artistic director Adonis Rose and the Grammy-winning 18-piece big band, the New Orleans Jazz Orchestra, playing the music of piano legend Alan Toussaint in their signature swinging style. See them February 26th for one night only. Reserve now at therosebrampton.ca or 905-874-2800.
Magic trick number 4. Magic Windows does more than custom windows for your house. We do custom windows for every room in your house. North-facing windows subject to winter winds? Simple. Increased insulation and built-in thermal blinds. West-facing windows letting in hot sun at the end of a summer day? Easy. Custom glazing and retractable solar screens. Custom windows, not just for your house, but for every room in your house. Magicwindow.ca. It's not really magic. It's just better, smarter thinking.
Okay, stop. The best appliance deal ever is still on at Goldman's. You'll save up to $500 on all Eco appliances. Yep, that's $500 on top of manufacturer rebates and promotions. Pricing on most Bosch dishwashers are lower than, well, they've ever been. Energy savings rebate by the Government of Canada. Check out Bosch at Goldmans.com.
Hi, I'm Cherry Tab, co-founder of the Herzig Eye Institute. If ever there was a year to improve your life by improving your vision, it's 2020. You've been thinking about it with every squint at the menu, every blurry headlight, every lost contact lens. 2020 is the year to say, I've had it. Herzig Eye Institute, help me do something about it. Because happily help you, we will. Google high definition vision. Learn about Herzig. Call us for a consultation. There's no charge. Look after yourself. Promise me.
Beaming across North America, The Conspiracy Show with Richard Sarrett from Zoomer Radio, AM 740.
Steve Ubaney is with us for the full 2 hours, and we will open up the phone lines in the second hour and take questions and comments. 416-360-0740 in the Greater Toronto area, 416-360-0740, and toll free from just about anywhere, 1-866-740-4740, 1-866-740-4740. Were you able to get access to Mohammed El Fayed or his former investigator, retired Scotland Yard officer John McNamara, who did a lot of his investigating?
John McNamara is an interesting guy. I've tried very hard to contact both of them, actually. And these people they're hard to find. Jack Firestone, who is mentioned again in the program, he was the eyewitness. He met with Al Fayed, and I was trying to get an in through him. He can't even contact him anymore. So these people are kind of having a pretty low profile moment here. They don't really want to talk about this anymore. They're really, and I don't know why. I don't know if it's because the evidence that has come out recently has shed new light on it that they don't want to discuss. I really don't know. I really don't know the answer to that, but there's something radically wrong in this whole thing. Princess Diana should be alive today. And, that crash, it was a bad crash. Don't get me wrong. I mean, that was a bad crash. That shouldn't have been a fatal crash. So
And conveniently, well, I don't know. Not surprisingly, on the one hand, Trevor Rees-Jones has no memory of what happened because, he went through the windshield, as I recall. But on the other hand, it's kind of interesting that, he buckles up, no one else buckles up. That's against protocol. And then he claims he has no memory of the incident. Now, the royal coroner who performed the autopsy, John Burton, he said that after performing the autopsy, he laid the rumors to rest that Princess Diana was not pregnant. And of course, many people have held this out as a possible motive, that she was pregnant with Dodi Fayed's child, meaning she would have been, she would have been giving birth to a Muslim who would have been, not in line for the throne. So I'm not sure why that would have been a threat. However, that's one of the theories. What did you discover about whether she was pregnant or not? Or does that enter into it?
in my mind, no. There's pretty good photo evidence that she was with child. I don't know if the photos were doctored or photoshopped or what, but she certainly looked like there was at least a 10 or a 12-week baby bump. Matter of fact, I ran this by Dr. Cyril Wecht, and I asked him, I said, if this person was pregnant, how far along would you put this? And he forwarded to someone else who was a specialist in the field, because he was not. The answer came back 10 to 12 weeks. She was only with Dodi Fayed for a month. So if she was, and I said if, that was someone else's child.
Right. There was another doctor she was involved with, I believe a physician from Pakistan who some believe that she was madly in love with, not so much with Dodi.
Hasnat Khan. Yep, absolutely. That was his name. And I hope I'm not butchering that name, but his name was Hasnat Khan. And they were on the outs, and she had always, she was really good with the public and with the paparazzi, and she knew how to manipulate the cameras. I look at her, and she was like a female Elvis Presley. She could never tiptoe into a room. Every camera was on her. She had the most riveting presence. So she knew how to manipulate the media. And that, the kiss picture of everything on the yacht and this and that was all contrived to get this man that she was madly in love with jealous, to get him to come to the table and take and scoop up what was rightfully his.
So she was using Dodi to make Khan jealous.
That's my opinion. Mm-hmm. And it's the opinion of various other people who are close to her. I think that she liked Dodi. I don't think that she was madly in love with Dodi. So if she was pregnant with him for a month, according to her butler, Paul Burrell, a month, 4 weeks, she was at least 10 weeks pregnant. So the math doesn't add up as a motive. So I don't know if anybody else has looked into that. I don't know. Maybe I'm the first. If I'm the first, good for me. I don't know if anybody else has or not, but you have to kind of look into things like this. There were other motives involved to get the French and the English government to cooperate at this level. And they're like I said, there are kings and kingmakers, and the kingmakers had a say in this one. There's something higher than these governments involved who are playing with this, and I'll leave it at that, because I'll save that for the book, and it'll make perfect sense when you read it. And you know what? This is a conspiracy, Richard. I didn't think about it. You know what? You're right. This is a conspiracy.
Of course it's a conspiracy.
Than a couple people together,
Of course it's a conspiracy. No question. I mean, I see, the way I look at the world is, this is just the way the world operates. And we like to think that we're far, less barbaric than we were during the Middle Ages. But if you look at the way that competing families would vie for the throne, whether you're talking about the War of the Roses, or how Richard III would dispatch with any possible usurper, even a blood relative, he would have them killed. This is just the way royal families have operated for 1,000 years. So why do we think things are different now? I mean, now they don't use a broadsword. They don't, they're a little more sophisticated in their methods. But I've always believed this is just the way the world operates. We'll take another time out and come back. Steve Ubaney, the author of the Who Murdered series of books. This is now his fourth, Who Murdered Diana? A Crash by Design. WhoMurderedBooks.com. Get your pre-order. Back with more of The Conspiracy Show. My name is Richard Serra. Don't go away.
Beaming across North America, The Conspiracy Show with Richard Serra from Zoomer Radio, AM 740. Dr. Samir Sinha, Director of Geriatrics at Sinai Health System and the University Health Network, addresses pneumococcal pneumonia in Canadians over 50.
The challenge within some older patients is that they might present atypically, meaning that they might not present with the fever. They might not have the full-on productive cough. They might just be tired and exhausted.
A doctor might not clue in immediately to the fact you have pneumonia.
And that's why it's just really important that if you're not feeling well, then you should actually be seen by a healthcare professional. Most people say that, oh, had I known that there was actually a vaccination against pneumococcal pneumonia, that they would have gotten vaccinated.
There are 2 different vaccines available that can help protect against diseases such as pneumonia caused by certain types of pneumococcal bacteria. Vaccines will not protect 100% of those who get vaccinated.
I think everybody at all ages should respect pneumonia. It's one of those things that can really negatively impact a person's overall well-being.
Funded by Pfizer Canada in support of prevention.
Introducing the all-new 2020 Ford Escape.
2020, baby! Oh, no!
With available head-up display technology.
Keep your head up!
And best-in-class second-row legroom.
For them long legs!
People are really excited about the 2020 Ford Escape SE all-wheel drive.
Understatement!
Lease it for 40 months at 3.49% APR with $3,000 down. That's only $187 every 2 weeks.
Only $187!
Visit your local Ford store or Ford.ca. Really?
Come and see me for my anniversary sale.
Hey everybody, repeat this.
This.
Very funny.
Very funny.
During Pollock's 45th anniversary sale, save 45%.
45%.
Now until February 29th, save 45% on all area rugs and runners.
To celebrate Pollock's 45th anniversary.
This is the true sale that customers wait all year for.
The biggest deals of Roncesvalles.
Let's carpet market.
The truth is not out there. It's right here. The Conspiracy Show with Richard Serra from Zoomer Radio.
Welcome back. Princess Diana seemed to have an eerie premonition about her own demise. After separating from Prince Charles, she sent a note to her butler with a disconcertingly accurate prediction. Quote, I am sitting here at my desk today in October, longing for someone to hug me and encourage me to keep strong and hold my head high. This particular phase in my life is the most dangerous. Someone is planning an accident in my car, brake failure, and serious head injury in order to make the path clear for him to marry, she wrote. So that's how Princess Diana predicted her own tragic end. Steve Ubaney is my guest for the full 2 hours, and his book is Who Murdered Diana? A Crash by Design, WhoMurderedBooks.com, all lowercase, the website where you can pre-order. So let's talk about some of the motives. So Charles couldn't remarry if Diana was still alive. True?
Big motive. Absolutely. Yeah, there's definitely a big motive there.
Right.
And there's there's been great authors who investigated this. John Morton, Alan Power, Andrew Morton, people who have written before me on this. And I'd like to say that they do great work, and I'm not going to discredit anybody who's written before me, but my book is a little different because of the motive, means, and opportunity that I screen people through. So I kind of pick up where they leave off and dig a little deeper. As far as motive is concerned, absolutely that's a motive. There's a couple of other ones that are out there that are pretty big.
Well, one motive has been suggested that the royal family didn't approve of her then boyfriend, Dodi Fayed, but I don't know. I mean, I think that it had maybe to do more with the father, a potential father-in-law, if in fact she was going to be engaged. And there doesn't seem to be much evidence for that. As you point out, she was in love with this Dr. Khan from Pakistan. So the idea that the royal family didn't approve of Dodi Fayed maybe more had to do with Muhammad al-Fayed. I guess he was a bit of a thorn in their side. But what do you think of that motive, that the family simply didn't like her hanging around with Fayed?
Well, you're right. But I want to, we've dug into this. Richard, you did a whole show on this back in the 90s. People don't know this was a television show, so you're really well versed in this. So we have to back up a little bit and explain this to some people who are listening who might not know this. These people all knew each other. Princess Diana was not a commoner. Her father was an earl. Okay. She grew up. Prince Charles actually dated her sister. These people had, estates next to each other. They grew up. They all knew each other. So she was not a commoner. Her father was an earl. She was definitely on Prince Charles' radar when it came time to marry because she was a virgin. So I just want to dispel the myth on that. Now, as far as Muhammad al-Fayed is concerned, he was definitely a thorn to the royal family. I'm trying to contain my laughter here because I was up writing last night about this very same thing. He bought the department store chain Harrods, which was a big thing and he was not going to be bullied around, or he was not going to play the royal family's game. So he was indeed a thorn for them. Marrying into that family was definitely a big motive. Definitely a big motive. They would not have wanted to be commingled with that. And we also have to talk for a second about what we were saying before the break about, for 1,000 years, how royalty has done this. And, I believe that there were two Chinese philosophers that fought to the death over this question. Are people basically good or are people basically bad? And we have to come to it's true, they aren't. I don't remember the philosophers' names, but the one who believed that people are basically bad killed the one who believed that they were basically good. So we have to come to the realization in our minds and not be so naive that there are bad people in this world and they do bad things. And they try very hard to cover themselves after they do it. If there wasn't darkness, there'd be nothing to judge the light by. Okay, so there are bad people in this world who want to do things for their motives. That's what separates my book from some of the other books that are out there. Is I take these people and I run them through motive, means, and opportunity. And I will show you the people who come through, because they don't always come through. Some people have motive, but they're not available to do it. They're not in that spot. So I think that's what separates my book from some of the other books that are out there. But there's definitely motive all over the place here. How they protect, I ran across something about, it was several months ago, I don't know if we talked about this or not, but how they protect the royal family when they are in a motorcade. They have a big motorcycle go in front of the motorcade. They are lined on both sides with the motorcycles and a big motorcycle in back, all of which are armed. That's exactly.
She was no longer afforded that, correct?
Correct, but that's exactly what happened. That's how they got the Alma Tunnel. That's exactly how they got that right. Get them to steer into the 13th pylon, because of the motorcycles and the flash and steering over. And I don't believe that anybody would be going at a high rate of speed to get away from cameras. I think that there was a little something else involved there, which I'll save for the book. It's quite a book. I don't believe, nobody's going to go 75, 80 miles an hour at a full run through a tunnel to crash into a thing when, they were taking pictures of them all over the place. Dodi Fayed's bodyguards and the people that surrounded him were giving tips to the paparazzi. They're kind of on their payroll as to where they're going to be so they could get the pictures, so they could sell the pictures to the media and make all kinds of money. So they were not shying away from pictures. It's a camera. It's not going to make you go 80 miles an hour into a pylon. So there's something else at play here. So I don't know. Like I said, I don't know if anybody has looked at it that way or not, but there's more. There's something more that was going on.
Let's talk again about Trevor Rees-Jones. He was a member of the crack parachute regiment. It's one of the toughest in the British Army. He completed a couple of stints in Northern Ireland. He served in the Royal Military Police. Just the kind of background that would have maybe put him in contact with members of the Secret Service. Does he come under your spotlight as a possible suspect?
I'm not going to comment on him because I don't want to save that for the book. But
well, you got to give us something here because people, we're on for 2 hours. People are listening; they want to hear a little something.
He was definitely everything that you said is correct. He was definitely he's definitely a bad boy. What I would do is if I were planning this, and I believe that Trevor Rees-Jones remembers this. Okay, I think he's just saying he doesn't remember because he doesn't want to be involved in this. Could you imagine the hounding that he would be under if he remembered details and said all these things out loud? I'm sure that he remembers what was going on. He definitely would know how they would protect the royal family. He would definitely know all the ins and outs and protocols of how they move important people from one place to the next. So, he's definitely a person of interest in my book, for sure. Yeah, absolutely.
And what about the old chestnut, rogue elements within any intelligence organization? And there are rogue elements. We're seeing that play out in the news now in the south of the border. Do you examine the possibility that a rogue element, even one or two people within MI6, decided, maybe on a wink and a nod from someone higher up, she's really getting to be a pain in the royal butt. Maybe we should do something about her. And maybe someone took it to heart.
For sure. Absolutely. And, these rogue elements they're absolutely true. I mean, and this is going on. I'm not Canadian. I'm in America. In American history, the FBI and the mob have leaked back and forth like a sieve for years, even way before Kennedy, all the way up through the Elvis Presley thing, all the way up. And it's still leaking back and forth. And in this situation, I'm sure it was the same. There were elements involved where, Princess Diana was... They didn't know what to do with her. The royal family has to hold themselves to a certain level of conduct. They're supposed to hold themselves to a higher class, a higher standard. And here you have her on television saying that Prince Charles is not fit to be king. There are 3 of us in this marriage. And it got to the point where they didn't know what the hell to do with her. They can't continue being slapped in the nose like this, but there's no one had ever done this before. No one had ever broken ranks like this and exposed all of their little dirty secrets, especially in a public venue like television. They really had no idea what to do.
Right. So, that was the Panorama interview on BBC with Martin Bashir. And some have said that utterance, "He's not fit to be king," was the nail in her coffin. We'll take another time out. Oh, we still have about a minute to go here. What about the possibility that a business enemy of either Muhammad or of Mohammed Fayed was responsible, and that the real target was Dodi? Did you examine that?
Yeah, Dodi Fayed definitely. He was a Hollywood film producer. He had a couple under his belt. And he was good at what he did, but he was also engaged to be married to an actress who he dumped for Princess Diana. So there were some people in Hollywood who didn't necessarily like Dodi. So, that's a road as well. There's a lot to this. There's a lot of twists and turns in the people here.
All right, we'll take some twists and turns when we come back. Steve Ubaney, my guest, the author of Who Murdered Diana, right here on The Conspiracy Show. Don't go away.
When in doubt, blame the government. You're listening to The Conspiracy Show with Richard Serrett from Zoomer Radio.
This is Zoomer Radio Toronto. CFZM FM and CFZM AM. Owned and operated by MZ Media Incorporated.
From Toronto, Canada, Earth. The Conspiracy Show with Richard Syrett on Zoomer Radio.
Well, thanks for inviting me into your home, your long-haul truck, RV, camper, taxi, your parents' well-appointed rec room with a simulated wood paneling, electric fireplace, and the painting of dogs playing poker, your loft, that greasy spoon just off the interstate, and your cabin in the woods. And a big howdy to everyone listening in on our flagship station, AM 740 and 96.7 FM, Zoomer Radio here in Toronto, Canada. Hiya to all of you tuning in on one of our affiliate stations across North America. And hey you, checking us out on the Zoomer Radio app, the Conspiracy Show podcast, available wherever you get your fine podcasts. And of course, our YouTube channel, Strange Planet. And those of you in the live YouTube chat who join us every week without fail. However and wherever you're listening, I bid thee the warmest of welcomes, and I thank you for your fine company. Steve Ubaney is an historical researcher and a suspense writer, and the author of the Who Murdered series of books. His latest is Who Murdered Diana, A Crash by Design. We've been talking about some of the suspects. We talked about Trevor Rees-Jones, the bodyguard who miraculously survived the crash, although broke with protocol by doing up his seatbelt when no one else's seatbelt appeared to be working, and then conveniently claimed he didn't remember anything after the fact. Perhaps a rogue element inside MI6, perhaps an enemy of Dodi Fayed or Mohammed al-Fayed. Who else is on your radar in terms of a suspect that I haven't mentioned? Well, we haven't mentioned Prince Philip.
Absolutely. Prince Philip is a guy who can make a lot of things happen with one phone call. This is a very highly connected person in the royal family. There's something else I wanted to add that was suspicious about the car. If we can just,
yes,
regress here for a second. It was a Mercedes-Benz. Mercedes-Benz offered to examine the car and give a non-biased report, a third-party report as to what happened. No one would let them near the car. So I thought that was, they offered on multiple occasions when it was being researched and investigated and this and that, and they said, we'll send a team out, give us the car, we'll send a team out, and we'll go through the car with a fine-tooth comb and see if there was anything suspicious or anything wrong or anything that had to do with the failure of our automobile. And, they wouldn't let him anywhere near the car. And to me, that's a little goofy. So with that, we'll talk about. Let me just pursue that a moment, because did the Paget inquiry or the Lord Stevens inquiry, did they examine the car? I mean, they didn't let Mercedes examine the car, but what about the inquiry? Did they look at the brakes, for example? Did they examine to see if there was anything mechanically wrong? But to my knowledge, they didn't examine it at all. They didn't even send anybody out there to look at the skid marks to figure out how fast they were and do the math and figure how long they were. I mean, it's the amount of evidence that was missing from this report it's incredible, really, how you could come to a conclusion and put the final exclamation mark on someone's death without doing any sort of real evidence and research. But again, I have to come back to this confirmation bias. Don't look for things that you don't want to find. We have to wrap things up in a tidy little bow. The loudest voice is usually a lie. I've noticed this. After the loudest voice, then the truth comes along in whispers. And it's when those whispers happen that people like me get involved and we start to investigate things. But the first one out of the gate, people like everything to be wrapped up in a little tight package. Lee Harvey Oswald shot John F. Kennedy, case closed, next case. And of course now there's a lot of evidence to support that there was more than one shooter. They're still trying to, figure that out. In this situation, it was a drunk driver, case closed, next case. They like to hang these little labels on things to get people to move along. And sometimes it's very, very difficult to do that. And, when you have Princess Diana dying in a car and you won't let anyone examine the car, That's beyond tolerance to me.
Very, very suspicious. So either they perhaps fixed the brakes, or I'm assuming it would be fairly simple to cause a sudden acceleration in the automobile without stepping on the gas, and that may have explained why Henri Paul lost control and hit the 13th column under the Alma Bridge.
Yeah, there's somebody said there's 600 feet of wiring in an automobile. That's a lot that can be screwed with. So there's any number of systems in an automobile that you can tamper with. I'm not suggesting that that happened, but I'm saying that hypothetically, there's a lot of things that you could do to a car to create a crash. And, again, I mean, you just go back into the track record. The boyfriend died in a car accident. Her first boyfriend, that was a security officer that was in charge of her, she had brake failure in 1995 driving an Audi. She wrote the note that said she was going to die in a car accident. She dies in a car accident. What do we need? A piece of Skylab to fall on us? I mean, it's how do you even look at this and not realize that there's something going on here?
All right, let's go to the phones, and we'll welcome Bob from Fenland Falls, Ontario. Bob, welcome to the Conspiracy Show. How are you? Do we have
Hello?
Bob there? Hey, Bob, you're on. Go ahead.
Oh, actually, I think you've got the wrong guy. Actually, my name's Kyle.
All right, Kyle.
And I'm in Brantford.
Okay, Kyle.
Anyways, I just wanted to call regarding the fact that Diana was apparently 10 to 12 weeks pregnant. That wasn't possible. She, at the time, if she had been with Hazmat Khan, she and he had actually broken up due to the fact that he was a very private man and wasn't willing to put his life out in the open because literally become Mr. Princess Diana type thing. But I don't see how she was pregnant, and it was also in the autopsy report stating that they had done blood work looking for the pregnancy hormone, and it was at normal levels.
Well, yes. I mean, that's the question, though. Do we believe the royal court coroner who said there was no indication that she was pregnant? But then one has to ask, why the rush for a partial embalming?
Mm-hmm. Well, the other thing, too, is that when it was stated that she was the least injured, from what I read and from what the research I've done, I'm a monarchist, I will be honest with you. But from what I have read, she had massive internal bleeding, a punctured lung, broken ribs, a broken arm. But for some reason, when the body was viewed by Prince Charles and others, her family, they all said that she looked normal. But even so, the doctors had said that when she came in, she was really badly beaten up on the inside.
Right. But what about the so-called protocol that they use in France, where they try and stabilize the person at the scene, and they would actually pull the ambulance over in an attempt to stabilize her, versus the American or North American version, which is they call it scoop and run.
Right.
You get that person to, if you suspect internal bleeding, you're not going to solve it in the back of an ambulance, certainly not pulled over on the side of the road. You got to get that person to ER into surgery as quickly as possible.
Well, they also stated that when she was en route from the accident site to the hospital, she went into cardiac arrest at least once. They managed to pull her back, and then they took her to they got her to the hospital, and then of course they rushed her into surgery, and we all know what ultimately happened.
Right.
But the fact was, I honestly believe, in my opinion, I believe it was just a tragic accident. She was she was hunted and mercilessly, the paparazzi were on her, 24/7. They wouldn't leave her alone. And I think what ultimately happened here was that she was just in the wrong place at the wrong time, and it was just a tragic accident.
Right. Well, the paparazzi were exonerated, and the blame really was placed on Henri Paul.
Mm-hmm.
All right, Kyle. Thank you for that. I appreciate it. Did you want to add anything to that, Steve, before we move along?
No, I ran across all the same evidence that the caller, that Kyle ran across. I frankly don't care if she was pregnant or not. I don't think that had anything to do with it. There are some pretty good pictures that suggest that she had quite a baby bump going on. Who the father was, I don't know, and I don't care. But I believe that was any sort of motive in this. But if they were claiming how the question was posed was, do you believe that this was Dodi Fayed's child? And in the time allotted, it wouldn't have. If in fact that happened, there wouldn't have been any sort of time that matched the baby bump that was apparent in the photograph.
Right.
As far as that's concerned, and again, saying, she was Princess Diana she was hurt pretty badly. I don't doubt that that she had internal bleeding. I don't doubt that she had a broken arm. I don't doubt that she had any sort of multiple contusions and lacerations. I'm sure she did. She was in a high-speed car accident. But I don't think there's any defense for, if she was that broken up inside, they would have taken her to a closer hospital, or the hospital. Look, what goes on in the back of an ambulance has nothing to do with how fast they're going. It makes no sense. It doesn't add up. If
right.
you
if
know that you've got somebody who was in cardiac arrest.
Right.
Sorry.
Right. Just keep driving. No, I was just gonna add. Yeah, sure. If the person is, if you're gonna lose that person, you're going to apply the paddles, to resuscitate them. You don't need to stop. I don't see why you need to stop the ambulance and pull it over to the side of the road.
It makes absolutely no sense. Makes no sense. And if she was broken up that badly, it wouldn't have taken them an hour plus to get her to a hospital. It just, none of it adds up. It doesn't make any sense. So, Kyle, thanks. And I can tell that you really looked into this, and I appreciate your call.
All right. Let's say hi to Melanie here in Toronto. Melanie, welcome.
Hi. I just want to have the callers ask themselves, do they believe that people agree to do wrong? Because the definition of conspiracy here in the dictionary is an agreement to do wrong, a plot. So I'm sure that in this world, millions of times a second, people are conspiring to do wrong to others. So people who don't believe in conspiracy should look up the definition in the dictionary. But I remember reading a book lately on the Tsar and how he was executed and his family. Well, before he was executed, they were on a train, and they were actually they could have survived, but the English crown refused to take Nikki because they were concerned, and this is historically not by quote-unquote conspiracy theorists, but that they did not want the competition of Nikki coming back to England and possibly his family claiming part of the throne or the wealth or whatever that was there. So I do truly believe that there's all these possibilities. But the other thing is, in our personal lives here in Canada, we know that there are certain institutions that do conspire to do wrong. They know that they've done wrong, and the chiefs higher up do nothing about it. For example, on W5 the other day.
Okay, I don't want to get too far adrift from what we're discussing.
Yeah, but I'm just saying that people have to ask themselves, do people conspire to do wrong? And also, was there insurance on Princess Diana? Could it have been somebody who wanted to collect the insurance? Not that she was poor or the English crown was poor, but it could have been as simple as that. Maybe they wanted insurance on Dodi Fayed or insurance on the driver or the other guy, and maybe that's what this was all about.
All right, Melanie, thank you as always. Good to hear from you again. Thank you. What about the idea that, again, if we're thinking about, you mentioned France and England have been at war multiple times for hundreds of years. Is it possible that some rogue element inside the French government saw an opportunity to knock someone off from the British royal family, even though, they were estranged, and decided, to do that?
I think anything's possible when you come to something like that. Like I said, I think we have to come to the realization that there are bad people in this world, and they do, share motives. There are different, Melanie, there are different definitions of conspiracy. The legal definition of conspiracy here in America is an agreement between two or more people to commit an illegal act. That may be judged illegal at some point in the future. So there are different definitions depending. Of course, we're dealing with different countries, so there are different different definitions out there. But sure, anything's possible. I haven't looked into that as far as looking into if insurance money was. She mentioned that. That's interesting. I never thought of that. Never looked into that. It might have been just something between the French and English government where they had a chance to take both of them out. I think personally that I think it was a twofer. I think it was an opportunity to get both of them at one time. And I think that there were murderers involved, not one. I think that this was well contrived, and I think it was beyond the scope of both governments. And we have, since when did the French and English cover up for each other?
That's an interesting point.
It's very, very interesting.
Let's talk about the family tree here, and the Spencer family, I believe, could trace their genealogy back to the Stuarts, maybe even further back to the Tudors. One could argue they had a legitimate claim to the throne, more of a legitimate claim than Saxe-Coburg-Gotha or the Windsor family. Did you look into that?
I actually did. Yeah, and you're absolutely right about that. I don't know. I don't know how the royal family ended up being in that position and not the other one, because the Spencer family their lineage is just as impressive as the other ones. So I did look into that. That was very. I'm actually still looking into the lineage because I believe that there's more there than meets the eye. This is a beast with 10 heads we're working on here.
Let's say hi to Lloyd in New Jersey. Lloyd, good morning. Welcome to the Conspiracy Show.
Good evening, sir. How are you?
I'm well.
I've been listening to some of this show. Very intriguing. I've known most of these things. It's definitely a beast with 10 heads, as you just said. Now, listen, the royal family, as you see it right now, is falling apart. And there's been a lot of embarrassment for decades. And my personal opinion concerning Diana specifically was her relationship with Fayed, Dodi Fayed. It would bring shame upon the royal family. And I'm not saying right or wrong. I think that's how it was viewed. I definitely tend to lean towards the, conspiracy to murder side. Now, I just want to throw an idea out there, because right now you have a similar thing going on with Prince Harry, somebody from outside the fold, with Meghan Markle. So I have no idea where any of this stuff is going to wind up, but they don't call the British the bloody British for nothing.
All right. Lloyd, thank you for that.
Yes.
Appreciate your call. I don't quite understand how the royal family would have been concerned, or why the royal family would have been concerned with an well, she was a princess. She retained her title, but she was no longer, no longer a threat to them as far as I can tell. And simply because she was marrying him or dating. Let's be clear about this. She wasn't marrying. She was dating a Muslim. So what? Now, had she become the Queen Mother and her consort was a Muslim, then maybe, I don't know, might have been a threat to the Church of England. I think that's a bit of a stretch. What do you think, Stephen?
Well, I don't know. I think Lloyd raises a really good point. The royal family is falling apart. They are trying to assert rules and live by rules in a higher echelon that are tending to not apply anymore. And look at Harry, and look at what's going on right now. And Harry, if what I read is correct, is so traumatized by his mother's death that he's still in therapy for it.
So this raises a good question. Yeah,
your heart has to just bleed for this kid. It's unbelievable. But as far as, they need to keep up appearances to justify the royal, the crown and all of that. They have to be different and special and higher echelon. And for them to be tarnished in a certain way, you'd have to realize now there are kings and kingmakers. If she was, this is 2 Muslims in a row now, correct? Hazlet Khan, I believe, is a Muslim, and so was this other person, if I'm not mistaken.
Right.
You know, there are powers at play here where, you know, the world was much, much bigger back then. It's small today. It's been connected with a lot of different things. Back then, the world was a little bit bigger, and we're not going to play with their country and their religion because it puts in jeopardy some of the wars that we might have going on. It puts in jeopardy a lot of trade. You know, the British, you know, they're pretty good in trade. There's a lot of things that could come into question if that was to happen. You know, here we have someone who was married to Prince Charles, who was on British television calling him everything but a white guy, and here she is. I mean, she was just disgracing the royal family all over the place.
All right, we'll take another quick time out, Steve, and on the other side, more of your phone calls, more of my conversation with Steve Ubaney, the author of Who Murdered Diana. Back with more right here on The Conspiracy Show. Don't go away.
My Strange Planet shop is filled to the rafters and bursting with great gear. Check out the Toxic Male and the Protect Our Power Grid t-shirts. My personal favorite right now, though, is my line of t-shirts celebrating carbon dioxide, the miracle molecule that makes life possible on our planet. But there's more than just t-shirts. There's mugs, phone cases, great hoodies and sweatshirts, tote bags, stickers, and more. The proceeds from the Strange Planet shop goes to support the work I do here. They help make this podcast, Conspiracy Unlimited, and my weekly radio program, The Conspiracy Show, all possible. So, get on up to my Strange Planet shop today. Just go to strangeplanet.ca. Remember, Christmas is coming. It's a strange planet. Get the gear.
Escape SC all-wheel drive. Understatement. Lease it for 40 months at 3.49% APR with $3,000 down. That's only $187 every 2 weeks. Only $187. Visit your local Ford store or Ford.ca. Really?
When last we left our consignment heroes.
I have an original Barbie doll from 59.
59 Barbies are several thousands of dollars.
I've got 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 outfits that go with her.
Yet another great discovery by Paul Kenny, compulsive shopper Barbie. Describe your vintage stuff to us on the next Consignment Heroes, Sunday at 11 on Zoomer Radio.
We want your stuff and we pay more is their motto. Downsizing? Selling a collection? Want the best price for gold and silver? Talk to Paul and Bogart at Toronto Gold, Silver and Coins. Call 905-737-GOLD or visit torontogoldsilver.com.
Winning Wheels is back at Gateway Casinos Innisfil and Casino River Resort in the month of March. Visit daily to receive ballots for your chance to win over $380,000 in cars and prizes across Ontario. Open to My Club Rewards members. Join the club today. Must be 19 years or older. Play smart. For full details and conditions for entry, visit gatewaycasinos.com.
You're listening to The Conspiracy Show with Richard Sarrett from Zoomer Radio.
It sounds like the stuff of a Le Carre novel or Ian Fleming novel. Did the intelligence agencies within Britain and France perhaps co-conspire to knock off or assassinate Princess Diana? Steve Ubaney is my guest, the author of Who Murdered Diana, and his series of Who Murdered books can be ordered from whomurderedbooks.com. This is the fourth in the series. Who Murdered Elvis, and then the 5th anniversary, and Who Murdered FDR. Again, Who Murdered Diana, the fourth in the series. How many will there be eventually, Steve? How many Who Murdered books?
Well, there's going to be 5 subjects and of course 6 books connected to 2 on Elvis. So Tesla is coming out later this year, and because his death was very suspicious. And I'm going to wrap it up next year with, I can't believe I'm going to put my nose in the JFK trough, but I just have to. there's some new evidence there that nobody has come across. So there's going to be 6 books all total.
I remember when I was in London, and this was in 2010. We were doing season 2 of the TV show, and I went into Harrods, and at that time, I can't remember. Yes, it was still owned by the Fayed family, and there was a display of the engagement ring, the supposed engagement ring that Dodi had bought for Princess Diana. Although friends of Diana's have come forward and said, they asked her, do you think he's going to give you a ring? And she said, well, if he does, it's going firmly on my right hand, which means people, I guess, they wear the engagement on the left. So it's going firmly on my right hand, meaning I am not marrying Dodi Fayed. And apparently no ring was presented to her, as far as we can tell. So it's been suggested then that Mohammed Fayed sort of played up this idea that his late son, had proposed to Princess Diana. Let's say hi to Judy. Judy's in New York. Welcome to the Conspiracy Show, Judy.
Hi, how are you?
I'm well, thank you.
Good morning, everybody. I'd like to make a couple of comments. I lived in Europe for 4 years, and I drove that tunnel 3 times. It's the tunnel under the city of Paris. And all of that area is well lit with amber lights and other types of lighting. And when they showed the photograph of that car that was damaged, it was up against the wall on the opposite side of the road, which means any motorcycles on that side, the driver's side, they would have been crushed. So I don't know where they went to. But according to the photograph, the doors on Diana's side, you could open, which was the passenger side, and also the guard, whoever he was, in the front seat. And the doctor, the first person up there who got there first, he said that she was very badly hurt, and her heart was even almost out of her chest. I don't know if you looked into that or not. I know you just mentioned injuries and that.
Right.
And also having the car behind the hotel. I stayed there with my mother once. You can park the car in the back, but the point is the driver always stays with the car or the guards. And they also said that it wasn't just the accident, because when you drive through that tunnel, it is all curves, and you cannot pick up speed like that. And the car, as they said, looked like it had been bombed. There was a bomb underneath, and maybe that was the smoke or whatever it was that was in his blood or whatever they decided, the driver. I just wanted to mention that because I have been to Paris 3 times. I know the area. I stayed at the hotel, and there is no way you can pick up speed to 75 miles an hour.
That's interesting. So you've driven that tunnel under the Alma Bridge, and it's very windy.
Yes, I have. It goes under the city. I always drove it at 3 o'clock in the morning because it's the easiest way to get into Paris because of the traffic on the Champs-Élysées.
Fascinating. That I wasn't aware of. All right, Judy, thanks for that information.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you. Good show. Thank you.
I appreciate it. A bomb. What do you think of that, Stephen? Have you come across that theory?
I actually have heard there's an eyewitness out there that had suggested that. Judy, that's phenomenal. I have not been to the tunnel. I know people who have been to the tunnel. You're another person who said the exact same thing. You can't get to that speed in that tunnel. So there was something else going on, and what were they running from? It just, the whole thing doesn't make any sense. The whole paparazzi thing doesn't make any sense. Princess Diana was flirting with the pop. She was posing for pictures. She was always, in limos and giving people $1 million shots that they were selling to the tabloids and so forth. And people were making their entire livelihoods on taking pictures of this woman who had these piercing blue eyes and this beautiful plume of hair. She was very photogenic, and she played it up. And all of a sudden, we're afraid of photographers? Makes no sense to me. So, yeah, that's very interesting. I have heard that before. It was great input, Judy. Thank you for your call.
Let's say hi to Mike in Mississauga. Mike, good morning. Welcome to the Conspiracy Show.
Interesting topic. Thanks for taking my call. 3 points to make. First, Princess Di, I think she was foolish into thinking that she could actually find happiness with Dodi Fayed, and maybe she was just attracted to him because he had enough wealth to keep her, out of the paparazzi's view. He could protect her with his wealth. My second point is the bodyguard. I mean, the driver. If the driver was that inebriated, wouldn't the bodyguard have noticed that? Wouldn't he have smelled his breath? Wouldn't he be checking that all out? Isn't that what a bodyguard security does?
Excellent point, Mike. Yes.
And my third point is that I heard somewhere that when they got her to the hospital, she was still alive, and that the French doctors in the hospital were surprised that she had died because they thought that her condition was well enough that she could have pulled through during the surgery. And that didn't British doctors come in and actually attend to her after the French, and they thought that maybe they had killed her?
I've heard so many conflicting reports. I don't know what to believe. Steve, unravel that for us. Were there British surgeons on the scene?
To my knowledge, it was only French on the scene, and the British came in afterwards and examined the body and said, there was no way that she should have died of this. That's not to suggest that she wasn't in a bad way, but she should have survived that crash. Beyond question, she should have survived. And you raise a really good point. That bodyguard the driver, Henri Paul, was not intoxicated. They have him on video, walking up and down stairs, tying his shoes. If he was as inebriated with alcohol and or whatever was in his system, whatever else was in his system, carbon monoxide, he would have been comatose. Something doesn't add up. It just doesn't wash.
I believe family members of Henri Paul's stated categorically he was no more than a social drinker.
Absolutely. Yep. And they actually have, there's been one investigator in particular who interviewed the people who saw him that night before he got in the car. And he was talking and walking around. He had a couple of drinks, but they were light fruity drinks. They were nothing heavy. And he was walking and talking as usual. So I don't know where this is coming from. But there's been, I just want to say that this has been researched and written about and researched and written about for 20 years. I'm definitely not the first one who's looked into this stuff. So most of this is out there. There's a little bit of new information out there. So my book's going to be a little different than what's already out there. But there's been some tremendous work done in this field. So a lot of this information has been covered in some of the other work. But it's a shame that John Morgan's not with us anymore. He really did some tremendous work in this field for sure. So
Mike and Mississauga, thank you for that. Do I have time for another one? Yeah, one quick call here. Adrian's in Scarborough tonight. Adrian, good morning. Welcome to the Conspiracy Show.
Good morning. Thanks, Richard. Quick question for Stephen. In all of this, I gotta think that is there anything about Prince William or Prince Harry having any suspicion or any insight into possibility that their mom was murdered? I mean, out of all people, those two, I would imagine, have got to, assuming that this is the case, would have some kind of insight into that, or suspicion, or even anger about that. Anything on that you came across?
Thanks for your call. I did not come across anything like that, and I can't speak for them. One thing that I did hear was that Harry was still in therapy, and the two boys were different. William was much more like Charles. He was reserved. He was calm. He was very quiet. Harry was like Diana. He was full of fun. He was a good time. He was always laughing. So you had these two kids who were different. They're not blind, and I'm sure that they have heard everything that we have heard.
Right.
I don't know.
Can you imagine if it was a member of their family that's responsible, and they know that, how difficult that would be for them? We'll take another time out, come back, take some more calls. Steve Ubaney, the author of Who Murdered Diana? A Crash by Design, right here on The Conspiracy Show. Stay with us.
at 7:30 on Zoomer Radio. Register now for a free introductory trading and investing class. Visit torontoclass.com or call 888-670-TRADE.
Different views make great conversation. This is The Conspiracy Show with Richard Serrett on Zoomer Radio. To speak with Richard live, call 416-360-0740 or toll free at 1-866-740-4740.
Welcome back. Next week on the program, Dr. Cass Ingram will be here to talk about coronavirus. COVID-19 is now being called, and also LA psychic Sloan Bella will weigh in with her own thoughts on coronavirus, the death of Kobe Bryant, perhaps the U.S. presidential election upcoming later this year, and more. That's next week on the program. Dr. Cass Ingram and Sloan Bella. Steve Ubaney stays with us, the author of Who Murdered Diana. This is the fourth in his Who Murdered series of books, and you can pre-order Who Murdered Diana, which is the actual publication date is in May. If you go to whomurderedbooks.com, whomurderedbooks.com, all lowercase, and you'll get yourself an autographed copy. We all remember those images very early on in 97, January, I believe. Princess Diana was in Angola. She was meeting landmine survivors. She was raising the profile of the work being done to clear landmines, not only in Angola, but around the world. And I want to get your take on whether her work in that field may have contributed to her death or her assassination.
Well, Richard, that's a great point. We haven't talked about that yet. I was kind of wondering we were going to get around to that, because I think there's a lot of validity to that. Princess Diana, outside of tweaking the nose of the royal family, she was bigger than life. I mean, when she would speak, everybody would listen, and she started to get involved in international politics. She started to talk about anti-landmines, anti-weaponry, things like that. And, she got involved in Bosnia, afterwards with the landmines and so forth. And there's big money in war. There's big money in war. There's billions of dollars in war, and arms brokers and machinery and weaponry and all kinds of stuff like that. So, if she was threatening the livelihood of some of these people, there's motive all over that. And those are so, well, like I've always said, they're kings and kingmakers. Those people would be some kingmakers. These are people who are really high behind the governments, real high up. So, that's definitely a motive for sure.
Well, the other interesting connection then with the landmines, I don't know if the Khashoggi family, of course, renowned, weapons sellers, arms sellers, were connected with landmines, but Dodi, his mother was a Khashoggi. This was Fayed's first marriage. So I don't know. Is there a connection there between the Khashoggi family?
That's really spooky. My blood really ran cold when I ran across that. I had run across that. And here we have Dodi's uncle is one of the biggest arms brokers in the world. And what an interesting twist that is. I would love to say that that's more than a coincidence, but I think that's all it is. That would be that, I couldn't, I had to read that 3 times when I ran across that in the research. I just couldn't believe that, that was like that. But, every now and then you run across some things that just really, really knock your socks off. And that was one of the things that I uncovered that I was really surprised at.
All right, let's say hi to Francis in Toronto. Francis, good morning. Welcome to The Conspiracy Show.
Good morning. Yes, a wonderful show, Richard. And I wanted to mention that I had the occasion to meet the best friend of Henri Paul. And he told me, this was in January 1997, he told me that Henri Paul was only a social drinker, and he was absolutely honored to be the driver of Princess Diana, and never would he take advantage or do any reckless affairs around that position. And absolutely, he was not responsible.
Well, now let me just get the timing straight here, because they died in August of 97. You said
Sorry, this was January 98. Pardon me.
Okay, that makes
Pardon
sense.
Me, that's right.
Okay.
January 98. I had the occasion to meet him. And, of course, it was still news of the day. And he was just adamant that his friend would never be inebriated in his day-to-day living anyway, especially doing that job. He said he just felt very privileged and honored to be the chauffeur of Princess Diana. And so I wanted to mention that. And another, curiously enough, my uncle was with a Fortune 500 company, and he had dealings annually with Prince Philip. And he was ultra-conservative. He just passed away at age 92 years ago. And I had the occasion to ask him, of course, right after this occurred, because he used to go and have dinner at Buckingham Palace annually. And he knew Princess Diana and Prince Charles and Prince Philip and the Queen and all of them. And he would be there every year, as I said. So he had a history with the family. And I asked him, what are your thoughts of this? And he said, without missing a beat, there's no question she was taken out. And I was really quite taken aback, because he was so conservative. And of course, in those days, in 98, I don't think a lot of people had really put the pieces together as they have now today with all the research that has been done. So I just thought I'd add that in.
Francis, thank you. Some great
Thank you for
information
your great show.
I appreciate it. Great hearing from him. All right, we'll take Stephen, I'll get you to respond to that on the other side. We'll take a quick time out. Come back. One segment remains with Steve Ubaney, the author of Who Murdered Diana? A Crash by Design, whomurderedbooks.com. Stay with us.
Question everything. This is The Conspiracy Show with Richard Syrett on Zoomer Radio. CARP presents Money You Didn't Know You Had. Savings and discounts exclusively for CARP members. Like this huge savings from Avis Car Rental. CARP members save up to 25% and can earn Aeroplan points on many rentals. Plus, membership in Avis Preferred, which lets you skip the lines and paperwork, is absolutely free. Check out all CARP benefits at carp.ca/benefits. We're talking hundreds, even thousands of dollars of money you didn't know you had. So if you're not a member, what are you waiting for?
Are you ready? Winter is here. It's time to protect your vehicle from its worst enemy with Crown, Canada's #1 rust protection. Crown's expert technicians apply an advanced formula to every area of your vehicle, helping it to last longer, look better, and maintain a higher resale value. Visit crown.com for a special offer and for the dealer nearest you. Crown. Protect. Maintain. Save.
Why did I wait so long? Our patients tell us that all the time at the Herzig Eye Institute. I'm Cherry Tab, co-founder of the Herzig Eye Institute. And Dr. Herzig and I want to ask you, why have you waited so long? You could finally be free from glasses, contacts, even reading glasses. Google high-definition vision. Learn about Herzig. Call us for a consultation. There's no charge. Afterwards, you'll say, why did I wait so long? Look after yourself. Promise me.
If you're looking for hot stuff, you've come to the right place. Summer, the Donna Summer musical. The new sparkling must-see musical of the moment, where every night the audience reaches a fever pitch. Summer, the Donna Summer musical. At the Princess of Wales Theatre, March 10th through 22nd. Get tickets at mervish.com.
Shaking
Radio.
Welcome back. A few minutes remain with Steve Ubaney from WhoMurderedBooks.com. Who Murdered Diana? A Crash by Design. How do we respond to the critics who say that in order to have pulled something like this off, you would have had to have so many people in on it? So even, for example, the ambulance attendants. I mean, how would they have arranged that? How would they arrange to have the right people in the right, personnel in the right hospital, and then they'd have to keep quiet. Surely, if there was a conspiracy, somebody would have spoken out. This always comes out, whenever we're talking about a conspiracy. Some people say, "How do you keep something like this quiet?"
Well, I think with people like, the answer is you don't, which is why these things are coming out now. After, and this has been 20 some years afterwards, you have deathbed confessions and people talking afterwards. But, look, at the time, these people just follow orders. These people, the people who, the ambulance driver, he's doing what he's told to do. So you don't have to control all these people. You don't have to do that. It's these people, you have to control, a couple of people who are well paid or in the inside of some sort of government agency who are telling people what to do, and they are the superiors. So the other people just follow orders. Francis, if you're still listening, what you said was very, very interesting about Henri Paul's friend there in that interview, speaking to that person in January of '98. Connect with me on that. I would very much like to interview that person if that's possible. So, Francis, if you're still listening, thanks very much for your call, and I'd like to speak with you a little bit further on that.
Francis was calling from Toronto, so if she's listening still and she wants to get a hold of you, does she do that through the website?
Yeah, she can do that through the website. If you go into Connect, there's a form that you fill out. You can also connect with me on Facebook. It's Steve Ubaney on Facebook. Stephen. Right. That's actually with a PH. Stephen. Ubaney.
All right. Now, the brother of Princess Diana, the Earl of Spencer, to this day, he doesn't believe that there was a conspiracy. What are your thoughts on that? Wouldn't you think if anyone would be suspicious, it would be perhaps her brother? Or, has he been maybe threatened into silence? What are your thoughts?
I can't speak for him. And I certainly don't know anything about threats like that. I'm just a little author, I don't know what the royal family's up to. I think that it depends on how much you trust people. I know that governments, including the United States government, has things like an act where they would, plant false documents and things for people to find to throw them off the trail. And I have to bring up this Elvis Presley thing and the Elvis is alive thing. What the evidence that they're finding is evidence that has been planted for them to find. So they're very good at this, getting in and giving disinformation and paperwork and this and that, because the more time we spend looking for Elvis at Burger King, the less time we try and figure out what really happened. So they're good at this. So as far as what that person believes, I can't answer for that person, but it depends on how easily you or how gullible you are in certain situations. Me, I like to use the 5 times rule. I ask why, and I get an answer, and I ask why again, and I get an answer, and I ask why again, and I do it 5 times until I'm satisfied. Some people don't do that. Some people just come up with, okay, well, it's that way, and they shrug their shoulders and move on. And that's fine if that works for them. It doesn't work for me.
I interviewed one of the royal watchers who worked at the time for one of the British newspapers. She lived in Hammersmith, and she told me, I'm not sure if she was referring to MI6 Richard Tomlinson or someone else, had suggested to her that the plan was not to kill Princess Diana. It was just to put a scare in her real good, maybe even shake her up, injure her perhaps, but not kill her. What are your thoughts on that?
Boy, that's even dangerous to even conceive and to think about. There's all kinds of things out there that people say. I have no idea. There's even a theory out there that I hope doesn't get any more traction than this, and I almost hate to repeat it, that Dodi and Diana faked their death. please stop saying this.
Yeah, that's
I mean, this is
that always happens, doesn't it? That always happens.
What an embarrassment to the royal family and to people who really like Princess Diana, and I'm among them. I thought she was pretty fantastic. The
other report that I've heard from witnesses, and obviously this didn't come up in any of the two official inquiries, but there were reports from a witness that, again, coming back to that motorcycle, that mysterious motorcycle in front of the vehicle, the Mercedes, that flashed the bright light. After the car crash, witnesses said the motorcycle stopped. There were two people on the motorcycle. The passenger in the back got off, ran over to the car, looked into the car, and then turned back to the driver of the motorcycle and crossed his arms, which apparently is some sort of military symbol for "we have a kill." Have you heard anything about that? Did that come up in your research?
It did. Absolutely. That was one of the people who were the witnesses who spoke to the French police, and of course that was lost. But the car actually, hit the pylon there, and then spun around and ended up on the other side. So I mean, it didn't. One of the callers mentioned, with the position of the car and on the other side. That's how it happened. And it hit and then spun around on the other side, so it was on the opposite wall. So it didn't just hit there. This was substantial what happened to this car. And I mean, Mercedes, they're a well-built automobile. And I mean, these things are tanks. We're not dealing with a little chintzy car here. And that car was destroyed. So this was quite substantial what happened.
We just got a few minutes left here. Just without giving too much away, but we got to give us a little something here. Just run down sort of the list of suspects, maybe some that we haven't covered yet.
Well, I go all through the royal family. I look at some of the arms brokers. I also look at the people who run the arms brokers. I'm into the Club of Rome, the Bilderberg Group. I take a look into all of those people and what their motives were. I look into the people who were behind the war in Bosnia. I also look at in France and why the French and the British magically cooperate with each other when they haven't for, I'm not even sure those two governments are friendly towards each other. And of course, I run down that, and then I present the whole evidence, which no one has looked at. They looked at it in the royal court. Well, again, the royal court is under commission of the Queen, who definitely wanted this to go away because it was damaging their reputation in their prestige. So I present the whole enchilada. I give all the evidence. I run down the motive, means, and opportunity. In the end, you're going to come up with what happened to her. And we're 22 years past, so almost all of the persons of interest in this have passed away. So it's interesting. You have to wait when something happens. Everyone is looking and clamoring for information. Everything's tightly held. But as the decades roll by, you have evidence that comes up, but nobody's looking anymore. So this is the premise of how I write my books. I dig into research that is new to solve old things. And this is what my book is about. WhoMurderedBooks.com, and you can pre-order that. The book is published in May. You can get an autographed copy from Stephen. WhoMurderedBooks.com, all lowercase. And up next, you mentioned, is Who Murdered Nikola Tesla? Yeah, Nikola Tesla, he really... this was really something for the ages. His modern technology put in jeopardy some of the people who were making millions and millions of dollars with obsolete technology. He also started to develop a death ray that he was trying to sell to the United States government. And when they decided they wanted to go another way with the splitting the atom, he was trying to sell this around the world. And it got him a lot of attention. So they find his body, and his room has already been ransacked. His files have already been taken. This is, you can't make this stuff up. This is when can we look forward to Who Murdered Nikola Tesla? That will be later. That'll be later this year. I'm putting 2 books out this year. So Who Murdered Diana will be out in May. Tesla will be out in probably September. You're a busy man, my friend. Well, I don't sleep for a reason, Richard.
All right, Stephen, thank you so much for this.
Thanks very much, Richard. It's a pleasure to be on your show. Thanks to all the callers, and get yourself a book. You won't be disappointed in this one. You'll like it.
WhoMurderedBooks.com. All right, we'll talk again soon. My thanks to Carlos and to Ryan and all of you for listening. Back next week with a brand new program. Dr. Cass Ingram and Sloan Bella, LA psychic. She's always full value. In the meantime, don't be afraid. There's nothing concealed that won't be revealed, and nothing hidden that won't be made known. What you hear in the dark, speak in the light. What I say in a whisper, proclaim from the housetops. Move over, Aphrodite, I'm coming home.